702.
The Big Interview
With Bongani Bingwa.
To give us now the South African government's official response, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, Dr. Naledi Pandor, joins us on the line. Thank you for your time this morning. I mean, given Queen Elizabeth's age, Minister, this wasn't unexpected. It rather reminds me of South Africa's own moment of mourning when Madiba passed away.
Well, indeed, good morning, Bongani, and morning to the listeners of Radio 702. I think there is a sense of an important global personality being lost, to the world, an image that was always present, associated with modern history, so larger than life, somewhat.
Larger than life somewhat, but that history is also one that is difficult, particularly, of course, for many people in parts of the world that Britain once colonized, that were once part of that empire.
Well, I think the whole notion of monarchy, of an individual that says or reflects the belief that I solely rule over a nation or a number of territories that are part of the imperial tradition is one that is really quite, ancient and really needs to be challenged and increasingly is being challenged. But there was an acceptance of her over time by many, others relating to a friend, of the generation that is older than us, our parents and grandparents. There was some attachment to the notion of the Queen while recognizing the history. So, I think one has to look at this from many, many sides. And of course, her reign was in the early period, the time in which the independence movements were strong in the colonized states, and it's when we in Africa began to achieve independence. So she had a knowledge of and an association with many of the freedom fighters and the early leaders of free African countries.
It was quite a tension, if I might suggest, Minister, the idea of being this monarch, but also being one who didn't have the power of leading a government and yet sending out signals. I think of the dance with Nkwame Nkrumah in Ghana. I think of 1991 at the Harare Commonwealth Heads of State gathering, where she made sure that Madiba was invited to the dinner, even though at that stage, of course, he really was the head of the ANC and not yet president of the Republic. She found ways to send those signals of support to freedom movements, did she not?
She certainly did. I think she had a fondness for President Mandela and certainly for South Africa. And I believe she probably brought her influence to bear on the government at the time, which was rather negative toward the ANC and made rather awful comments about President Mandela through the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. But you always had a sense of the Queen being rather more dignified and concerned about ensuring, that South Africa enjoyed freedom and democracy. The odd thing about the British monarchy, and in fact monarchies worldwide, is that democracy occurred as a resistance, to aristocrats and to monarchies, and yet the monarchies continued to thrive in the context of the practice of democracy. So rather different from our tradition, where we don't have a national monarch, as it were, and have a very strong and independent republic.
And yet within that republic, of course, there are monarchies that exist. And it's part of the, I suppose, uniqueness of the age we live in.
Very, very unique. I suppose trying to grapple with how you remodel societies and ensure that there's an integration of modern democratic practice and culture that is embedded, within communities. So, you as governments have to grapple with the diversity that makes up the person that is African or English or Belgian. And it's in how that mix is managed that societies thrive.
King Charles III, as he will now be known, made a comment recently, of course, when Barbados became a republic, referring to the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history. Those were his words. How do you see the future of the Commonwealth of Nations without Elizabeth II?
I think the Commonwealth of Nations will continue to be this essentially a society of nations with a common language, common relationship to the United Kingdom, and with a set of programs that are rather liked by the Commonwealth nations. It's been interesting that non-English speaking countries that were not colonized by Britain have applied to become members of the Commonwealth because they see the activity in education programs, environment, sustainability, and other areas of work that are led by the Commonwealth Secretary General. So it's more a club rather than a political organ by any means.
Appreciate your time, Dr. Naledi Pandor, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa. The President, of course, President Ramaphosa, issuing his own statement via the presidency yesterday, saying Her Majesty was an extraordinary and world-renowned public figure who lived a remarkable life. Her life and legacy will be fondly remembered by many around the world. The Queen's commitment and dedication during her 70 years on the throne remains a noble and virtuous example to the entire world. So said President Ramaphosa.
Current events, developing stories,
Tough questions.
your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.